3 to 2 fractions. And it's one of the biggest talks that was at last year's Astro by a lady called Al Wahab on the nomination of EIA. So we had already started our trial already. So the methods, we had an open label single institution phase 3 randomized controlled trial that we started from April up to August. That was the recruitment phase. And it was mostly consecutive recruitment right after the 50 grays of external beam radiation, concurrent cisplatin. So the first arm had 8.5. I'm going to show you how we've got to 8.5 grays versus what we were using back then of 6.7 grays. These were randomized criteria, but usually the last point was very hard to achieve because many of our patients, as we've seen from the colleagues in Uganda, we have much more squamous cell carcinoma than all other histologies. So the age range was there and disease stage at first presentation. So the inclusion criteria and exclusion criteria were there. And we wouldn't go for any lesion that is above 5 centimeters, which is the recommended size by the American Brachytherapy Society. So this is the equation that we use, the basic one for BED, and we used both sets of alpha-beta ratio. For the first one, I hope you can see it, we've got for a BED of 10, we've got a D of 8.96, and for BED of 3, we've got about 8.48. So with a team of physicists, we came back and had a consensus of 8.5 grays times 2. And this was our linear quadratic equation that we used. So our outcomes of interest were local control, toxicity, and survival, and the details of how we use. So one bigger limitation that you can already see is the fact that with local control at the baseline and 3-month follow-up, we only had ultrasound, which is the objectivity is really, really limited. So at the level of brachytherapy, this is how the images would look. So basic tandem and ring applicators, and for the anterior posterior views and the lateral views. And then at the end, after planning, this is the image you would be having for placing dwelling points all over the applicators and having your rectal and bladder point defined. So statistical analysis was done mainly to compare local control for both arms, toxicity for both arm and survival data, and then we controlled for the randomization criteria that we've mentioned. We had a confidence interval of 95% and p-values made to test the hypothesis. Now the results, I'm going really fast because we have 2 presentations in one. So results, we had between April and August 2017, which was our time of follow-up, we had about 65 patients recruited. Now the issue here is we had all the patients recruited within the time of recruitment. Obviously many of the patients were excluded because they couldn't get to the exclusion criteria. And now the bigger issue was a machine broke down in the process and we couldn't recruit enough. Now, at 9 months, every patient was there without no loss of follow-up, had about 47 patients who are really keen to not go into the intent to treat analysis. And we had about 47 patients overall, so which is about 70% of response rate. Now 15 received 8.5 and 32 received 6.7. It's about the double. And we had much more patients within the 41 to 50 age bracket, which is pretty much what the Ugandan situation is. So now remember, we couldn't get into the randomization for the histology type, which is very difficult because we only have squamous cell carcinoma anyway. So we would only do local control randomized and controlled for stage. So at the end, we had about the same non-statistical significant difference between local control between the two. There was only a trend of local control for the first arm. And toxicity profile was here, and about 12 events over the 9 months were recorded. And we had mostly GI and GU toxicities, and mainly we had much more toxicity on the side of arm B. At the end, survival profile was here, 9 months, my statistician really argued the fact that he had to make it, but then we didn't have any difference of the two. Perhaps with a longer follow-up we could have a certain difference. Now, there is a model that was created by the American Brachytherapy Society, the LQ model, that is now developed as well by the University of Vienna, and they developed an LQ model for HDR. It also has an LDR and a PDR slide as well. We can go about it like within the break. And our two regimens actually do compare in terms of BED, as it's shown. And our findings actually show that 2 insertions are as effective and as safe as 3 insertions. Now, as the ABS recommended dosage of 7 grays times 4, 6 grays times 5, or 5 grays times 6 weekly, it can usually be applied well within the low volume centers. So that those are the patients who usually see 1 to 5 patients a week at most. We get to see about 20 patients a day, and it becomes very, very difficult in terms of sustaining them over the weeks. And while we're trying as well to keep within the 8 weeks that are recommended for treatment of locally advanced cervical cancer. So our findings correlate with other single institution studies, mainly by KOR in India, which is like the biggest. And KOR actually tried 7 times 3 compared with 9 by 2. And it differs largely on terms of toxicity, usually with the Al-Wahab study that she presented in 2017 at Aortic. So as I've said again, limitations. The original sample was about 130 patients that we've calculated to get to the results that we wanted, but then numerous factors contributed to not getting to the full patient's analysis, and we actually counted about 22% of loss of follow-up. And disease size before brachytherapy, as I've mentioned, was done with ultrasound. So that becomes a bit difficult with objectivity. That was the end of my presentation. Thank you.